What if the fiercest question is not, is this true? But what makes this true in the first place? Socrates would answer with a patient, stubborn smile. He would say the value of philosophy isn't the final answer, but the habit of asking that never stops asking. In a world rushing towards certainty, his method keeps the space where truth can breathe. Ever matters because the moment we declare something settled, we close the door to becoming wiser. The simple practice is to question the premise behind every premise, to trace the thread from claim to cause, and to watch how the thread unravels if we tug too hard. In the market streets of ancient Athens, where olives glisten and arguments flare like small suns, Socrates moves as a quiet force. He doesn't seek applause, he seeks clarity. He starts with a single prompt, not a lecture. Define what you mean by justice, or courage, or happiness. And when the answer arrives in a familiar shape, he twists it with another question until the shape cracks and reveals something nearer to the truth. He wants you to see your own thinking more clearly. Not to memorize a doctrine, but to feel the weight of your own words. The rhythm of this dialogue is not dramatic thunder, but a steady insistence that refuses to settle into easy repetition. A farmer says, "I know what's right," because everyone agrees. Socrates presses, "Does everyone agreeing make it right, or only loud?" A merchant adds, "We should follow the laws." The reply comes softly, "Which laws, and for whom? And under what conditions would a different law make more sense?" The questions are not traps. They're a way to test whether the thing called truth is a living idea or a comfortable slogan. Ever matters because it keeps the room open for revision, even when pride wants closure. Socrates' method is a conversation with a mirror. It reflects back not who you are told to be, but who you might become if your beliefs earn their place by reason and test. He treats opinion as a seed that must be watered with scrutiny. If you claim that courage is a shield against fear, he asks when fear exists and what courage does in fear as presence. If you claim a life well lived means wealth and status, he asks what those symbols do to the soul when a house is empty. The act of questioning reveals gaps, and those gaps are where ever begins to glow. It's not that certainty is bad. It's that certainty without room to question becomes a prison for the mind. The turning point comes when we notice a paradox. The more we defend our beliefs, the smaller our world often becomes. But the moment we loosen the grip of certainty, even just a little, we gain access to nuance, to sympathy, to perspectives we had not anticipated. Ever matters here because it keeps the door ajar for perspective shift. A doctrine is transformed not by a single knock, but by a long sequence of careful knocks, each one checking whether the doorframe has changed with the world. Think of a belief as a tool. A hammer can build a house. It can also break a wall you never intended to topple if you swing without aim. Socrates asks you to test not only whether your tool is sharp, but whether your goal is worthy. If the aim is to live well, then the tool must be fit for that purpose across changing circumstances. The sea of life is unpredictable. A philosophy that adapts is not a betrayal of its roots, but a fidelity to its purpose. To aid a person in living more thoughtfully. Ever matters when we translate abstract ideas into everyday actions. What does it mean to treat someone as virtuous, to honor the weak, to seek fair play, to resist despair in the face of injustice? The questions become practical whenever we refuse lazy answers. A society that prizes quick certainty trades away the patient, moral attention that makes justice possible. So Socrates doesn't merely ask about virtue. He asks about the conditions under which virtue thrives. He makes philosophy a practice, not a pamphlet. And in that practice, the word ever remains a compass. It reminds us that every conviction has a horizon, another horizon sits just beyond it, inviting us to move closer, or to see a different map of the landscape altogether. The twist is not that Socrates denies truth, but that he denies the final trap of certainty masquerading as truth. He shows that the best defense of a belief is not a rigid argument, but a living dialogue that can survive challenge. The best homage to ever is not to cling to a conclusion, but to cultivate the courage to re-examine the grounds on which that conclusion stands. When you live this way, you begin to notice how often people mistake assurance for knowledge, how often certainty narrows the field of possible futures, how often the most lasting wisdom emerges from the willingness to revise. Resolution arrives as an invitation. Let your mind be a workshop, not a showroom. If philosophy aims to help a person live well, then let the questions govern the pace of life as much as the answers do. The Socratic way makes thinking a form of care for your own mind, care for others' voices, care for the future you will inhabit. Ever matters because it keeps learning alive, not as accumulation, but as a generous, disciplined process of becoming more accurate about what matters. So when you hear a bold claim in a late-night chat or a headline in the morning, pause. In that pause lies a doorway labeled ever. Step through it and ask the hard but hopeful questions. What do you mean by that? How would you test it? What happens if you assume the opposite? In that space, philosophy stops being a dusty relic and becomes a simple, stubborn way of living. A willingness to stay curious, to stay unsettled, to stay humane. And perhaps that is Socrates' gift most of all, to remind us that the journey toward wisdom is long, winding, and wonderfully unsettled. The ever in philosophy is not a slogan, but a practice that requires patience, courage, and a steady willingness to revise. If we commit to that, the questions we pose today may become the questions that shape our tomorrow. Outro tone, will you let the habit of questioning extend into your everyday choices? Or will you hand the word ever back to certainty and walk away richer in pride? But if we carry ever as a living discipline into classrooms, we see learning become a field of experiments. A teacher doesn't present fixed answers, but poses questions that invite students to map the terrain of uncertainty. Imagine a seminar where every claim is treated as tentative, and the goal is not victory, but illumination. In that stance, debate becomes a craft of listening, not a contest of who is loudest. The room becomes a workshop where mistakes are fuel, and revision is the only compass. Ever matters for leaders who resist slogans, for communities building policies with pilots, feedback, and slow, honest adjustment. A city council that treats every proposal as a hypothesis begins to hear the people most affected, not just the loudest advocates. A platform that treats science as provisional invites humility, not posturing. The habit extends to our most intimate beliefs, to whether we trust our own motives, to how we respond when evidence shifts. The twist here is not a rejection of truth, but a sharper sense of responsibility. Truth becomes something we earn, not something we own. The more we test a belief, the more its edges brighten. The more it can bend under pressure without breaking. Ever matters because it keeps the map alive, always ready to redraw itself in light of new coordinates. If we apply this to ethics, we don't settle for a single rule that fits every century. We craft principles that are generous, precise, and adaptable. Courage becomes steadiness in the face of uncertainty. Justice becomes fairness tempered by nuance. Happiness becomes a life that can welcome critique and growth. The Socratic method reappears as a practical tool. Ask, listen, test, revise. And when we do, we notice a quiet miracle. The mind expands not by shouting, but by listening to the world as stubborn truths. Ever matters in the long arc of history because it curbs our worst impulses. The urge to be certain at the expense of people. To win debates at the cost of truth. To treat doubt as a glitch rather than a compass. It keeps philosophy from becoming a museum and turns it into a living workshop. And in that workshop, Socrates remains a fellow traveler, not a distant authority, guiding us with questions that never fully resolve, only keep refining. So the practice is simple and demanding. Welcome revision, honor evidence. And let humility do the heavy lifting. Live with questions that stay in your field of view long after the answer arrives. Let ever be the thread that ties thought to action, curiosity to care, doubt to responsibility. Now you might wonder, how do I begin this in my own life? Start with a single, concrete claim you've held for years. Ask, what would it take to test this claim in the next week? Who would be affected? What data would you value? What would change if you were wrong? Then listen to the answer inside you and let it shape a small, imperfect step toward a wiser version of yourself. The road is imperfect, but the practice is priceless. The Socratic path, isn't grandiose. It's intimate, steady, almost stubborn in its care for accuracy. Ever matters because it protects the fragile space we need to learn, grow, and relate to others with honesty. If we carry that forward, the questions we ask become acts of mercy toward our own confusion. But to understand a little more clearly what it means to live well in a changing world, the invitation lingers, not as a demand, but as a possibility, a doorway that opens toward more thoughtful action and deeper connection. The door is labeled ever. Step through, and